June 4, 1942. 10:22 a.m. Japanese carrier Akagi, 150 miles northwest of Midway Island. Lieutenant Takashi Yamamoto's hands trembled as he adjusted his binoculars, scanning the northern horizon where American carriers shouldn't exist. Through the ready room porthole, he watched Admiral Nagumo Chuchi study the incoming radio reports with an expression that transformed from confidence to confusion to something approaching panic. 3 carriers. The Americans had 3 carriers at Midway. For 6 months, Imperial Navy intelligence had calculated every variable, planned every contingency, wargamed every scenario. For Japanese carriers against 2 American. Mathematical certainty. Overwhelming superiority. But mathematics meant nothing to the 54 American dive bombers now screaming down from 14,000 feet toward Akagi's flight deck, where 40 armed and fueled aircraft sat waiting to launch. Through the intercom, Yamamoto heard the air raid klaxons wailing across the fleet. Nagumo's voice, usually calm and authoritative, carried an edge of barely controlled alarm: all carriers, emergency launch. Get those planes airborne now. Too late. The first bomb hit Akagi's midship elevator at 10:26 a.m. The 1,000-pound explosive penetrated the flight deck and detonated in the hangar bay, where aviation fuel and armed torpedoes transformed one bomb into 40. Within minutes, Admiral Nagumo's flagship was an inferno. But Yamamoto's attention fixed on something else. Something impossible. Among the American dive bombers pulling up from their attacks, he recognized aircraft markings from reconnaissance photos. Photos taken 27 days earlier at Coral Sea, 2,500 miles south. Aircraft from USS Yorktown. The carrier Japan's pilots had left burning, listing, dead in the water. The carrier Admiral Takagi had reported eliminated. The carrier every intelligence assessment confirmed would need 3 months minimum in a proper naval yard. Yet here she was. Very much alive. Her aircraft killing Japanese carriers. Establishing the paradox. In Tokyo's Naval General Staff Headquarters, the operational map for Midway showed 2 red markers representing American carriers, Enterprise and Hornet. Intelligence confirmed their presence. Lexington lay on the ocean floor after Coral Sea. Saratoga remained under repair in San Diego. Yorktown had been struck by one 250-kilogram bomb that penetrated 5 decks, destroyed 6 compartments, killed 66 men, ruptured fuel tanks, and wrecked machinery spaces. Japanese naval architects had calculated repair requirements, minimum 90 days in the finest dry dock, possibly longer. The mathematics had been irrefutable. The planning immaculate. The assumption certain. Yet certainty was burning across 4 Japanese carrier flight decks as American bombs fell from aircraft that shouldn't exist, launched from a carrier that should still be in dry dock 4,000 miles away. The question that would haunt Japanese admirals for the rest of the war was simple: how? The answer began 27 days earlier in the Coral Sea. May 8, 1942. 1:20 p.m. 500 miles northeast of Australia. The attack emerged from scattered clouds at 8,000 feet. 18 Aichi D-3A dive bombers from carriers Shokaku and Zuikaku found USS Yorktown recovering aircraft from the morning strike. Lieutenant Commander Kikichi Takahashi led the formation into their dives, targeting the American carrier's distinctive island structure. The first bomb near missed, exploding 20 feet off the starboard bow and buckling hull plates. The second struck home. The 250-kilogram armor-piercing bomb penetrated Yorktown's flight deck directly amidships, punched through the hangar deck, pierced 3 more decks, and detonated deep inside the ship. The explosion killed 66 men instantly, destroyed the central damage control station, ruptured fuel oil tanks across 30 frames, disabled the forward elevator machinery, and started fires in 6 separate compartments. From Zuikaku's bridge, Japanese observers watched Yorktown emerge from the smoke trailing a wide oil slick, down by the head, listing to port, speed visibly reduced. Takahashi's pilots reported her finished, listing so severely that landing aircraft was impossible. Photographs showed destroyers moving alongside for rescue operations. Admiral Takagi Takeo radioed Tokyo, American Yorktown-class carrier damaged beyond immediate repair. Effectively eliminated from operations. Estimate 3 months minimum repair time. The Emperor was informed. Naval planners removed Yorktown from their operational calculations. In their planning for Operation MI, the invasion of Midway, she no longer existed. Captain Elliot Buckmaster, Yorktown's commanding officer, received the damage reports with grim determination. 66 men dead. 6 compartments flooded. Fuel contamination across a third of the ship's tanks. Forward elevator jammed. 3 boiler rooms damaged. Maximum speed reduced from 32 knots to perhaps 24. By every standard of naval architecture, by every regulation in the damage control manual, by every principle of proper seamanship, USS Yorktown needed months of dry dock time. But Buckmaster had no intention of giving her months. He had a war to fight. Damage control parties, this is the captain. We're going home. And we're going home fast. I want maximum sustainable speed within 6 hours. Make it happen. Chief Engineer Commander John Delaney reviewed the damage and did something Japanese engineers would never consider. He ignored the proper solution and invented an improvised one. Instead of waiting for dry dock to replace the damaged elevator machinery, he simply disconnected it and welded the elevator platform in the down position. Instead of pumping out flooded compartments properly, he sealed them off entirely and counter-flooded opposite compartments to correct the list. Instead of repairing ruptured fuel tanks, he isolated the worst ones, sealed the moderately damaged ones with quick-setting compound, and accepted the reduced fuel capacity. Within 8 hours, Yorktown was making 20 knots toward Pearl Harbor. Japanese submarines tracking her reported to Tokyo that she was proceeding at approximately 6 knots, standard for severely damaged vessels. Naval intelligence accepted this assessment. By their calculations, Yorktown wouldn't reach Pearl Harbor until mid-June, far too late for repairs before the Midway operation scheduled for June 4. But Yorktown maintained 20 knots for 8 days across 3,300 miles, arriving at Pearl Harbor on May 27. Her arrival presented a sobering sight. The oil slick trailing behind her stretched for miles. Smoke wisped from temporary patches. She listed despite counterflooding. Rear Admiral Aubrey Fitch, who had witnessed the Coral Sea damage firsthand, cabled Pacific Fleet Headquarters with his assessment, recommend minimum 90 days yard time for restoration to combat readiness. But Pearl Harbor in May 1942 was no longer the peacetime naval station attacked 6 months earlier. The salvage operations on the battleships sunk December 7 had transformed the base into something unprecedented, a forward combat repair facility where workers measured time in hours instead of months and viewed proper procedure as a luxury rather than a requirement. Admiral Chester Nimitz met Yorktown at the dock personally. While Japanese admirals commanded from battleship flagships hundreds of miles behind battle lines, Nimitz waded through ankle-deep water in dry dock number 1 before it finished draining, his khaki uniform soaking, his hands black with oil, personally inspecting damage that would determine the fate of the Pacific. He climbed out 30 minutes later and found Captain Claude Gillette, the yard superintendent, and Lieutenant Commander Harold Finstag, the hull repair expert, waiting with their preliminary assessments. "How long?" Nimitz asked. Finstag consulted his clipboard. "Admiral, proper repair of this damage requires cutting away destroyed structural members, fabricating replacement sections, rebuilding 6 compartments, replacing fuel tanks, overhauling machinery. Minimum 30 days, realistically 45 to 60. How long to make her fight?" Finstag looked up from his clipboard, understanding the different question. 72 hours, sir. If we ignore proper procedure. If we patch instead of replace. If we accept ugly solutions that work instead of proper solutions that take time. Nimitz nodded once. You have 72 hours. Make her fight. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then Finstag gulped and said, "Yes, sir." The intelligence imperative. 400 yards from dry dock number 1, in the basement of Building 1, Commander Joseph Rockefeller's Station Hypo had performed their own miracle. They had cracked JN-25, the Japanese Naval Operations Code. They knew AF meant Midway. They knew the attack date, June 4. They knew the Japanese order of battle, for carriers of the First Air Fleet. More crucially, they knew the Japanese assumed they would face only Enterprise and Hornet. This intelligence transformed Yorktown's repair from urgent to existential. Without her, Americans would face 4-2 odds, mathematically unsurvivable. With her, 4-3, still unfavorable, but possible. Rockefeller personally briefed Nimitz on the intelligence picture. "Admiral, the Japanese have spent months planning this operation. Every calculation, every contingency, every tactical decision assumes they face 2 American carriers. If we can put a 3rd carrier at Midway, we don't just improve our odds. We shatter their entire operational foundation." Nimitz understood. Yorktown's presence wouldn't just add aircraft. It would add doubt. And doubt, in military operations planned with mathematical precision, could be more devastating than bombs. The 72-hour marathon. May 28, 5:30 a.m. Before dry dock number 1 fully drained, while water still swirled around workers' ankles, 1,400 men swarmed aboard USS Yorktown. They came from every shop on the base: welders, electricians, ship fitters, machinists, pipe fitters, riggers, carpenters, painters. Many had worked through the night on other ships. They would work for 72 consecutive hours on Yorktown. The repair defied Japanese industrial philosophy at every level. Instead of careful planning and hierarchical approvals and sequential procedures, the work proceeded as controlled chaos. Supervisors made instant decisions. Workers crossed trade boundaries without asking permission. Engineers abandoned textbook solutions for whatever worked. The only rule: make her fight. The bomb damage repair revealed the stark philosophical difference between Japanese precision and American improvisation. Japanese doctrine for the 250-kilogram bomb hole: cut away damaged steel across 6 frames. Fabricate new structural members to exact specifications. Rebuild each deck with proper materials and procedures. Restore original strength completely. Time required, 30 days minimum. Pearl Harbor's solution: leave the damaged steel in place. Weld massive plates over the entire area, creating what one engineer called a metal scab. Shore up weakened frames with wooden beams from Oahu construction sites. Ignore proper procedures. Accept reduced strength in that area. Time actual, 18 hours. The fuel tank crisis demonstrated the same philosophy. Japanese protocol for ruptured fuel tanks: drain all contaminated tanks completely. Clean and inspect each tank individually. Cut away damaged sections. Weld and replacement tank segments. Pressure test every repair. Refill slowly while monitoring for leaks. Time required, 2 weeks. American solution: pump out the worst contaminated fuel. Seal moderate ruptures with quick hardening cement originally developed for airfield runway repair. Weld plates over external cracks. Ignore tanks too severely damaged for quick repair, just seal them completely and reduce overall fuel capacity. Test by filling rapidly and watching for major leaks. Time actual, 11 hours. The machinery damage showcased improvisation over perfection. The bomb explosion had damaged 3 boiler rooms and destroyed superheater systems, reducing maximum steam pressure and limiting speed to approximately 27 knots instead of the design 32. Japanese standards would require complete boiler replacement, a dry dock job taking weeks. Pearl Harbor's approach: ignore the superheaters entirely. Accept the speed reduction as operational reality. Focus on basic functionality: making steam, making power, making propulsion. Bypass destroyed steam lines with temporary pipes. Rebuild damaged systems using parts cannibalized from the ship's machine shop and nearby vessels. Time actual, 14 hours. The electrical repairs abandoned all pretense of proper naval architecture. Destroyed wiring was replaced by running new cables along decks, through hatches, across overheads, anywhere that worked. The result looked like a ship strangled by electric cables, but every system functioned. Electrician Lewis Walters, 21 years old from Ohio, later recalled, "We didn't have procedures for what we were doing because what we were doing shouldn't be done. We ran cables where cables shouldn't go. We welded connections that should be properly terminated. We used electrical tape where we needed proper insulation. Everything was temporary, improvised, ugly. But when I threw the breakers, power flowed where it needed to flow. The arithmetic of the impossible, 20 tons of steel plate welded, 35 miles of electrical cable strung, 400 tons of contaminated fuel pumped out and replaced, 3 destroyed compartments sealed and abandoned, 6 damaged compartments patched and returned to service, continuous arc welding drawing so much electrical power it caused rolling blackouts across Oahu. The workers ate sandwiches while welding, slept in 15-minute shifts against bulkheads, worked until hands bled and then worked more. When the welding load threatened Oahu's electrical grid, Hawaii's civilian population accepted rolling blackouts without a single complaint. When the shipyard needed lumber, Oahu's construction companies delivered truckloads without requisition paperwork. When workers needed obscure parts, machine shops across the island manufactured them overnight. Chief Carpenter Boyd Mackenzie ignored damage control manuals completely. When he found structural beams weakened by the bomb blast, beams that proper procedure demanded cutting out and replacing, he simply welded steel plates over them and moved to the next problem. When inspection officers questioned whether the repairs met naval standards, he responded, "Don't know if they meet standards. But I know they'll hold long enough to kill Japanese carriers. That's the only standard that matters now." May 30, 1942. 9 a.m. USS Yorktown backed out of dry dock number 1 with shipyard workers still aboard, continuing repairs as she gathered speed through Pearl Harbor's channel. These workers would ride the ship out past the harbor entrance, leaving only as she turned north toward Midway. The air group assembled on her flight deck was itself a testament to improvisation. Bombing Squadron 3 from USS Saratoga. Torpedo Squadron 3 cobbled together from Coral Sea survivors. Fighting Squadron 3 combining pilots from 3 different squadrons who had never trained together. Equipment mismatched. Procedures unstandardized. Coordination untested. But armed, fueled, and ready to fight. As Yorktown cleared the harbor entrance and the last workers climbed down to the pilot boats, Chief Finstag stood on the dock watching her disappear toward the horizon. An officer asked him, "Will those repairs hold?" Finstag watched the carrier until she was a gray silhouette against the morning sky. "Honestly? I don't know. We did things to that ship that no engineer would approve, using methods that no manual describes, accepting risks that no peacetime navy would tolerate. She's not properly repaired. She's improvised, jury-rigged, patched. But she's going to fight. And maybe that's enough." Point Luck Rendezvous. June 2, 1942. 325 miles northeast of Midway. When Yorktown joined USS Enterprise and USS Hornet at the coordinates codenamed Point Luck, the other carriers' crews lined the rails in stunned silence. They had monitored radio traffic about Yorktown's Coral Sea damage. They had heard she might not make Midway. But here she was, launching aircraft, running flight operations, looking battle-ready. Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, commanding Task Force 17 from Yorktown, understood something the Japanese didn't. Yorktown's greatest weapon wasn't her aircraft, it was her mere existence. In his final briefing to the assembled carrier commanders, Fletcher laid out the strategic reality. "Gentlemen, the Japanese have planned Operation MI for months. Every detail calculated. Every contingency wargamed. Every tactical decision based on one absolute certainty: they will face 2 American carriers. When our aircraft appear over their fleet, when their pilots count squadrons that shouldn't exist, when their admirals realize they face 3 carriers instead of 2, that certainty dies. And when certainty dies in military operations, confusion follows. Confusion creates mistakes. Mistakes create opportunities. Opportunities win battles. Meanwhile, aboard Akagi 700 miles west, Japanese confidence reached its peak. Admiral Nagumo Chuchi commanded the most powerful naval striking force ever assembled, carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu with 248 aircraft, supported by battleships, cruisers, destroyers. Opposing him, 2 American carriers with perhaps 150 aircraft total. Veterans of Pearl Harbor against Americans yet to win a carrier battle. Numerical superiority, qualitative superiority, tactical superiority. Captain Minoru Genda, Nagumo's brilliant air operations officer, had wargamed every scenario. Even if Americans achieved surprise, even if every American aircraft found its target, Japanese pilot skill and numerical advantage would prevail. The only variable that could fundamentally change the battle's mathematics would be a 3rd American carrier. And intelligence confirmed that was impossible. Yorktown was dead. June 4, 1942. The shattering. 4:30 a.m. Japanese carriers launched 108 aircraft against Midway's airfield. The morning began exactly as planned. Nagumo held 108 aircraft in reserve for the American fleet, positioned his carriers perfectly, and waited for his trap to spring. 7:10 a.m. Japanese scout plane radioed, American carrier sighted, bearing 010 degrees, distance 200 miles. 1 carrier. Expected. Nagumo ordered his reserve aircraft rearmed from land attack bombs to ship attack torpedoes, a 45-minute procedure. 7:45 a.m. follow-up report, appears to be 2 carriers. 2 carriers. Still within calculations. Nagumo continued rearming operations, confident that 4 Japanese carriers against 2 American meant certain victory. Then the American torpedo bombers arrived, and calculations began disintegrating. 8:20 a.m. Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet attacked first. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron led 15 TBD Devastator torpedo bombers against the Japanese fleet without fighter escort, knowing the mission was likely suicide but accepting it as necessary. All 15 were shot down. Only Ensign George Gay survived, clinging to a floating seat cushion, watching the battle unfold around him. But Waldron's sacrifice accomplished its purpose, pulling Japanese combat air patrol down to sea level. 8:40 a.m. Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise attacked. 10 of 14 Devastators were shot down. No hits scored. But again, defending Zero fighters were drawn down to wave top level, burning fuel, expending ammunition. 9:15 a.m. Torpedo Squadron 3 from Yorktown began its attack run. This was the moment Japanese lookouts first realized something was wrong. As 12 more Devastators approached from a different bearing, flight operations officers counted the attacking aircraft mathematically. 15 from first attack plus 14 from second attack plus 12 from third attack equals 41 torpedo bombers. But 2 American carriers could only carry approximately 28 torpedo bombers total. The mathematics were wrong. There weren't 2 American carriers. There were 3. On Hiryu's bridge, Admiral Yamaguchi Tamon calculated rapidly, his expression transforming from confidence to concern. 3 carriers meant the battle's arithmetic had fundamentally changed from guaranteed victory to uncertain struggle. But before new orders could be formulated, before the fleet could adjust to this new reality, before anyone could process what 3 American carriers meant strategically, the dive bombers arrived. 10:22 a.m. The decisive 6 minutes. Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie, leading Yorktown's bombing Squadron 3 with 17 SBD Dauntless dive bombers, had gotten lost. Following his navigation plot, he should have found the Japanese fleet 15 minutes earlier. Instead, he found empty ocean. Then he spotted a Japanese destroyer steaming northeast, leaving a white wake. Guessing the destroyer was rushing to rejoin the fleet, Leslie followed its wake. His guess proved correct, and accidentally perfect. His 17 bombers arrived over the Japanese fleet at the exact same moment as 33 dive bombers from Enterprise, not by coordination but by coincidence of timing created by Leslie's delay. From 14,000 feet, Leslie surveyed a target so perfect he could barely believe his fortune. For Japanese carriers sailing in rectangular formation, their flight decks packed with armed and fueled aircraft waiting to launch. Their combat air patrol, normally stationed at altitude to defend against exactly this threat, circling at sea level 10,000 feet below where they needed to be, pulled down by the torpedo attacks. Leslie keyed his radio, "Attack as assigned. This is what we came for." He rolled into his dive, aiming at Soryu, the carrier in the northwest corner of the formation. His 17 bombers followed. Simultaneously, Enterprise's bombers targeted Akagi and Kaga. The Japanese carriers never had a chance. With their fighter cover at the wrong altitude, with their decks crowded by aircraft that couldn't launch in time, with American bombs already screaming down at 240 knots from 14,000 feet, physics and geometry left no room for escape. 10:24 a.m. 3 bombs hit Soryu's flight deck within 30 seconds, exploding among armed and fueled aircraft. Secondary explosions followed as aviation fuel ignited, torpedoes cooked off, ammunition detonated. Within minutes, Soryu was an inferno visible for 50 miles. Simultaneously, Kaga took 4 bomb hits and exploded. Akagi took 1 bomb hit, just one, but placed perfectly amidships where it penetrated to the hangar deck and detonated among aircraft being rearmed. Admiral Nagumo's flagship became a blazing wreck in seconds. Within 6 minutes, 3 of Japan's 4 carriers were burning uncontrollably. The Pearl Harbor striking force, the most powerful naval formation in Japanese history, was dying. And Lieutenant Takashi Yamamoto, watching from Akagi's bridge before the bomb hit, had recognized the aircraft markings on those dive bombers. Yorktown's aircraft. The carrier they'd killed at Coral Sea. The ghost ship had returned for revenge. Admiral Yamaguchi on Hiryu, the sole surviving Japanese carrier, faced impossible odds but refused to surrender the initiative. At 11 a.m., he launched 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters against the nearest American carrier. Yorktown. As the strike approached, Flight Leader Lieutenant Mio Kobayashi studied the American carrier through his binoculars, feeling his certainty about this war tilt sideways. The island structure. The flight deck configuration. The distinctive profile he'd memorized from reconnaissance photographs. This was Yorktown. The carrier his service's pilots had reported destroyed. The carrier intelligence had removed from all calculations. The carrier that had no reason to be here. Except she was. 12:05 p.m. 3 bombs hit Yorktown. 1 penetrated 3 decks before exploding. Fires erupted. Steam pressure dropped. The ship went dead in the water, listing, smoking, looking exactly as she had looked at Coral Sea 27 days earlier. For the second time, Japanese pilots left Yorktown apparently finished. For the second time, they were wrong. Captain Buckmaster toured the damage personally, wading through smoke and water, inspecting the Pearl Harbor repairs under combat stress. The welded plates had held. The improvised bracing hadn't failed. The jury-rigged systems, ugly and unstandardized, were functioning. Chief Engineer Delaney reported, "Captain, the Japanese bombs hurt us. But the Pearl Harbor repairs are solid. Everything the shipyard did is holding. Give me 2 hours." Damage control teams sealed burning compartments, bypassed destroyed steam lines using the auxiliary systems Pearl Harbor welders had installed, counterflooded to correct the list, and relit boilers that proper procedure said should be inspected first but immediate necessity said should be fired immediately. 1 hour and 35 minutes later, not the 2 hours requested, Yorktown was making 19 knots, recovering fighters, looking so operational that when Hiryu's second strike arrived at 2:30 p.m., the Japanese pilots believed they were attacking a different, undamaged carrier. Lieutenant Tomonaga Joichi, leading 5 torpedo bombers, all Hiryu had left, radioed back in confusion. He'd been briefed to attack a damaged carrier dead in the water. Instead, he faced a carrier underway at 19 knots, launching fighters, showing no visible damage from the first strike. His confused report to Hiryu suggested they were attacking a second carrier, leading Japanese commanders to believe there might be 4 American carriers present. While Tomonaga's confusion prevented coordinated Japanese response, his torpedoes accomplished what bombs couldn't. 2 hit Yorktown's port side, flooding fire rooms, destroying boiler uptakes, causing progressive flooding that no amount of damage control could stop. This time, Yorktown truly was finished. But she had accomplished her mission. By absorbing 2 Japanese strikes that would otherwise have targeted Enterprise or Hornet, she had protected her sister carriers for the counterattack. At 5 p.m., Enterprise's dive bombers found Hiryu and destroyed her. 4 Japanese carriers burning. 1 American carrier mortally wounded but 2 intact. The battle's mathematics had reached their final calculation. The final act. June 6, 1:31 p.m. USS Yorktown drifted under tow, listing but still afloat, damage control team still fighting to save her. Japanese submarine I-168, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Yahachi Tanabe, found her. Tanabe fired 4 torpedoes from 1,200 yards. 2 hit Yorktown. 1 hit destroyer USS Hammond alongside. Hammond broke in half and sank in 4 minutes. Yorktown absorbed 2 more mortal wounds but refused to sink. June 7, 7:01 a.m. After 19 hours of progressive flooding that no human effort could stop, USS Yorktown finally rolled to port and slid beneath the Pacific. Tanabe, watching through his periscope, logged, sank American carrier, probably Saratoga. Even in death, even identified by a Japanese submarine commander who'd studied American carrier profiles extensively, Yorktown created confusion. The Japanese never understood they'd faced the same carrier at Midway that they'd reported sinking at Coral Sea. Their intelligence failure was total.